Hello, everyone. I'm Deidre DeJear, special contributor to business publications and DSM Magazine, and I want to welcome you to our Lifting the Veil series called Life Transform. This is the second event of our 2021 series called Young Adults in Limbo. Last year, we launched a Lifting the Veil mental health series called Life Interrupted, which was so well received. And we brought it back to focus on the mental health effects of the multiple disruptions of 2020 and 2021 and what we can do to move forward and to transform our lives for the better. Today, we'll be focusing on young adults in limbo. So, what does that mean? For people in their late teens and early to mid 20s, this last year has been incredibly challenging. Graduation was interrupted, college was interrupted, a strange job market, remote work, so much change. And for so many, a feeling of waiting and ever as if would everything come back to normal. So today we'll look at what young adults may be experiencing and offer support to them and to those in their lives. I want to encourage you all in this process. For those who have been here before, I want to make sure that you are actively involved in the chat. If you have questions, please put them in. But before we get started, I want to give us a few housekeeping keeping items. If for some reason we lose power, which has happened in the past, just log back on and we'll be right here waiting for you. If your line drops, just log back on. We'll be right here waiting for you. And if you feel so inclined, if you learned something today, share it on social media, share it with friends, share it with family, and also use the hashtag DSMLTV Young Adults. DSMLTV Young Adults, and we'll drop that in the chat for you. While you're paying attention to the chat, again, I want you to drop those questions in there. We want to make sure that your questions are answered by our guest experts. So let's start chatting. What is one way last year has affected you? I want you to put that in the chat right now. What is one way this last year has impacted you, affected you? When I think about what has impacted me, the biggest part, and Susanna just put it in the chat, uncertainty. Not knowing what tomorrow was going to bring, not knowing what the next few months was going to look like, but knowing we had work to get done and work to be done, and we were working as if we were behind. And so that was one of the impacts that last year had on me. When I think about young people that are special to me, that are in my lives, I've got lots of godchildren, nieces and nephews. One of the things that impacted them the most was the lack of connection that they had with their family and their friends. I can't tell you how many times I personally have FaceTimed them just to talk to them and encourage them and get them going and get them excited about something, even if it's just seeing my face. So please feel free to share about how this last year has impacted you and perhaps some young adults in your lives. Before we get started, I want to thank a few groups. First of all, I want to thank Susanna DeBaca, President of Business Publications Corporation, and to the DSM team who worked tirelessly to create and execute the series. I mean, from the concept to the stories to finding experts, from designing the slides to working with sponsors and promoting this program, it has been a large undertaking, and the DSM team and all of BPC staff, we are so grateful for them for making sure that we have programs like this that we can be a part of, because they are truly top notch and they care about the community. The DSM team does an outstanding job on so many things, including their work on Lifting the Veil. In addition to this series, they created the annual Lifting the Veil publication. If you haven't seen it, you can see the online version. We'll drop the address in the link. But if you want to order that good old hard copy, which is pristine, give us a call at 515-288-4582, 515-288-4582. This work would not be possible without our sponsors, and so we want to make sure we acknowledge them so you all know who's supporting this effort. Our supporting sponsor, Delta Dental, another supporting sponsor, Clyde Behavioral Health, a sustaining sponsor, Employee and Family Resources, and our supporting sponsor, IMT Insurance. Now, let's get started on how this program will work I'll introduce our guest experts and I'll share an audience question. Our experts will have a chance to answer that question and discuss tools and techniques to help you all, our viewers. We'll also take several questions from the audience and we'll repeat this same format. So stay engaged. Our first guest expert is Remy Andrews. Remy is a licensed marriage and family therapist working in private practice in the Cedar Rapids area. Remy's initial training was in trauma-informed play therapy, and he worked extensively with children and families to support the entire family's mental health, especially in rural areas. During this time, Remy recognized the need to specifically for LGBTQIA+ communities, affirming therapists. After moving to private practice, this specialty continued to grow and is currently Remy's primary focus of care. Remy is passionate about the accessibility of mental health services through affordability, telehealth, and minimizing bias through training and consultation. Remy, how you doing?
I'm so happy to be here today, Deidre. Thank you for having me.
Happy you are here. We'll come back to you soon. Our next special expert is Amy Davis. Amy is the statewide manager of clinical services for LSI. Amy has been with LSI for 18 years, serving in multiple programs, including foster care and adoption, behavioral health, community programs, and therapy services. Today, Amy manages mental and behavioral health services statewide and community programs, including trauma-informed services for Polk County Juvenile Detention Center. She is involved in multiple partner groups that seek to improve mental health outcomes for children and families. Hey, Amy, how you doing?
Hello, thanks so much for having me.
Oh, we're so happy you're here. So happy you're here. Our next expert is Alex Piedras. Alex is from Grandview University. And yes, Alex has been the Director of Multicultural and Community Outreach at Grandview since 2005. He has 25 years of experience working in the Des Moines community for several different nonprofits. He is dedicated to issues of equity and inclusion. He is also a part-time mental health counselor at Youth Emergency Shelters and Services, Hope Hall. Alex, how you doing, friend?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Good. It's so good to see you.
Good to see you.
Lastly, we have Brianna Young. Brianna is a licensed mental health counselor. She is trained and certified in trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. Brianna has worked with Orchard Place Guidance Center, helping adolescents, young adults, and their families. For the past 5 years, she has worked with Mercy One in several different mental health roles, including, currently Brianna serves as the manager of the Mercy One Psychiatric Residency clinic manager and continues to act as a licensed mental health counselor. Brianna has a passion for creating educational opportunities through therapeutic relationships and community engagement for those interested in mental health. Hello, Brianna, good to see you back again.
Hey, Deidre, thanks for having us.
Awesome. So as you all see, we have a wealth of knowledge here in our presence, and we are super excited about being able to get a little bit more information so that we could help our family, our friends, and our loved ones through this process as life has been somewhat interrupted, but now we're transforming. Let's go to our first question. All right, it looks like we're having a little bit of a technical challenge, and that's okay, but we know the question, and the biggest question is, what can we do to take care of others? And when we asked that question was asked actually by Grant Kelly. He's an undergrad student at Iowa State University. And over the past year, he's seen a lot of his friends struggle with anxiety, stress, and other issues. So point blank, when we see our friends, our family struggling with those challenges that we've talked a lot about over the past year and some months, what can we do to help take care of others? And we're going to start this question with Brianna.
Thanks, Deidre. It's a really good question, and it's a question that a lot of people are having all through the COVID pandemic, as well as currently as we start to venture out of it and venture into the world again. And so one of the big things just to remember overall with this question is everyone is experiencing some kind of battle in their own world throughout the past year. Some people are handling it, have coping mechanisms or the ability to handle it a little bit better than others, and others, no matter the coping mechanisms, their world has just been rocked significantly. Goals have changed, life has changed, and no matter how good you are at coping with things, it has just been plain stressful. People have developed mental health diagnoses or just symptoms of like anxiety, stress, depression type symptoms. They have been magnified in people that maybe already had the underlying type of symptoms or diagnosis. And so it's really, really important with this question and with young adults that they just recognize everybody is going through something right now. It just looks different. And some people internalize that a little bit more, and some people externalize that. Some people externalize it in healthy ways. Some people externalize it in unhealthy ways. Same with internalizing. There's a level of kind of processing within before you need to process outside. And so it's just important that you, as you're looking to help others, that you first take into consideration maybe what kind of a person is this, if you're friends with them already, and kind of recognize what their processing looks like. But really, really important is offering that help, encouraging communication, making out loud statements, respectful statements, but making statements towards them that encourages conversation of some kind to give those individuals opportunities to talk, to vent, to share, unbiased opportunities. Things that everybody can do is just being a friend to everybody else, having a listening ear. So that's one of the most important ways. One of the other ways that I wanted to bring up is just making sure that we are encouraging engagement. If you happen to be friends or family with one of these individuals that you've identified, your friend struggling with these anxiety or stress issues, is encouraging engagement. And again, going back to everybody has a different comfort level with how safe they feel outside of their home right now. And so recognizing that in your friends and your family members and taking that into consideration when you talk about engagement. Engagement can be a Zoom game night, or it could be an in-person game night. It could be a trip to a restaurant, or it could be dinner at home. So taking into account safety levels of everybody, but encouraging engagement, encouraging social activity. Even for the most introverted person through COVID, they are craving even just the presence of social activity, so that we can people watch. I'm an introvert too. I like people watching, but overall, some social interactions can be overstimulating. And so, but people watching is fun for some introverts. And so creating opportunities to engage with one another can really help people that are having newly developed mental health symptoms like anxiety or other depression-like symptoms.
Thank you. Remy, we use the word anxiety a lot now. It is a very hot button word. And so I want you to help us break it down just a little bit to help people understand what does anxiety look like? What does it look like for an individual to experience anxiety? Because I think we can use the word, but I would love for us to be able to acknowledge what those behaviors look like so we can better identify those in ourselves and in others.
Yeah, absolutely. I think oftentimes when we use the word anxiety colloquially, we're talking about most commonly excessive worry, or perhaps rumination on certain topics like upcoming big events, or perhaps just general feelings of being overworked, or going back to the office after working remotely for a year, or going back to school in person after having been doing class by Zoom. So what we're also looking at is like, we can have some pretty significant physical side effects of anxiety as well, like lack of appetite, sleep disruptions, lots of fidgeting, unable to just sit and relax, and always like, and even maybe sometimes an internal pressure to like constantly have something to do. That we're like, oh, we have to fill up our time. We have to, you know, have achievement has to be, or activity is like all of a sudden becomes so important to us, when perhaps it's like what we actually needed to be doing is finding a way to relax and to sit back and to maybe slow down some of those thought processes that that are kind of getting us into what we often call a spiral.
So, you know, speaking of that spiral, I want to go to Amy on this. You know, how do we help individuals and tool them with resources when they are in that spiral? Because that's somewhat challenging to interrupt for the individual and for the person who's trying to be of help.
Absolutely. You know, and I think what COVID brought to us was we all had to kind of live in our emotion, because all of us had to kind of become an introvert of some sort. And so our own feelings and our own emotions, we had to learn to live in. And that oftentimes took people into a spiral. I think the biggest thing that we can do for others is just really, like Brianna said, is just being that listening ear. Understanding that everyone has different struggles, everyone's at a different place in their life. Everyone, you know, had additional things to go through during COVID, whether that was COVID related or not. Just regular stressors of life. So just sitting down, being there, you know, I know that a lot of us kind of just developed new hobbies as well during shutdown, and when we were able to spend a little extra time with families. For myself, it was gardening, it was vegetable planting, which you couldn't find a lot of those things around because everybody was doing it. You know, if it's just planting, you know, a little pot and bringing it to a friend that you feel is maybe having a spiral, just sitting outside on the porch and listening. The biggest thing is just, you know, being aware of what it is that you can do, but also taking care of yourself in that moment too, so you can be there for them.
You know, Alex, you have this firsthand connection every single day, whether it's through Yes or it's through Grandview, interacting with young adults like Grant at Iowa State, who's experiencing, you know, his friends going through anxiety. What are you seeing there, and what's your food for thought to help your students get through these challenging times?
I think one thing that I always mention to people when we start talking about this is to always be respectful of how other people are experiencing this pandemic. I know that sometimes we get into the mindset of trying to minimize, you know, the effects of it on people, but as it has been said, we never know where people are coming from. So it could be that they experienced the illness and they were sick for several days, or maybe they have lost a relative or a friend to it. And what I've seen a lot sometimes among young people is a little bit of minimizing, you know, where they're trying to tell their friends, oh, it's not a big deal. It's just like the flu. And when that happens, you know, obviously triggers very strong emotions for those that have, again, experienced it in a very different way. So what we try to do is we try to engage people and say, you know, be respectful of others, be aware that maybe your own experience is not the same for everyone. And with that, then be, as it has been already said, a listening friend or advocate, but do it with respect and with the awareness that again, we all have experience in very different ways, and we have to, in a way, learn to be truly supportive. And maybe it's not in our nature to be that supportive, right? Because again, some of us are dealing with it in a different way. Then maybe have the ability or the confidence to say, you know, we have like here on campus, we have a counseling center that provides confidential and free services. Maybe you should look into that, or just encourage people to maybe, if they don't want to use the services on campus, to seek that assistance outside of university with the different nonprofits that provide those services. But again, just always be respectful. I guess that's what I always tell you, the people I interact with. and to be aware that trying to minimize others' experiences of the pandemic or how they have dealt with it can be sometimes detrimental. So, but for the most part, I think I've seen young people just trying to support each other. And so that's always good to see.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So let's transition to the next question, which is a lot more introspective. Let's play it.
Many of us have been under significant stress in the past year. And even with the pandemic ebbing off, there is still a great deal of uncertainty and stress left ahead. What can we be doing to take care of ourselves?
Yeah, so this is a question from Claire. She's a grad student at Buena Vista. And, you know, when we think about the stress that many of us have endured, you know, our young adults are in a very critical time in their lives. They're learning who they are as adults, and they're learning that through socialization. They're learning that through taking jobs they may not want to take, or going to school, and all of these things. How do they balance being a young adult and doing what young people do, but also acknowledging self-care in their lives and figuring out ways to do that? We're going to start this question right here with Remy.
Thank you, Deidre. This one, I'm going to piggyback off of what Alex was just sharing with us, as far as oftentimes reaching out for those services that are available to us is one of the things that can oftentimes be most helpful, is to just have a listening ear of someone who can perhaps offer some outside perspective, or a new insight that we haven't considered. I think occasionally when we have situations like this, it is, you know, when we go into therapy or any kind of counseling situation, oftentimes we're like, there's a perception of, well, this is something only I have experienced, and this is an individual problem. However, with this pandemic, it's been something that has affected us all, again, in differing ways, but we have all experienced some significant change to our lives over the past year. So seeking out those counseling services where they are available. Alex mentioned several universities have free and confidential counseling services available to them. I know Mount Mercy here in Cedar Rapids has a clinic that's open to the public that is also low to no cost. And there are other options available as well. Oftentimes therapists, if cost is an issue, especially as we may see for young adults, several therapists do offer like sliding fee to make it a more affordable and accessible. If a young person is working, oftentimes even part-time employees have access to employee assistance programs. Oftentimes short-term services can be offered through this, and it may not even just be therapy services that can be offered through this. Oftentimes it can be access to massages or yoga classes or gym memberships that are also really wonderful and valuable ways to take care of ourselves.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And we also kind of mentioned, you know, the introversion that was forced on us. I think we see a lot of folks like, oh, I want to get out and I want to do everything and I want to see everybody that I haven't seen for the last year, and finding, like, recognizing that maybe that the stress, the social stress of like being out there all the time, and taking those moments to take care of yourselves. And especially, you know, again, one of my passions is always accessibility and affordability. We talk about the barriers or the poor mental spaces that social media can create. But TikTok is actually one of the things that gets brought up a lot. Like I'll bring up something in therapy, like an idea or something, and I'll have a client be like, oh, I saw a therapist talk about that on TikTok. And it's like, oh, there's this wealth of information that is being brought to light in social media platforms that I encourage people, are free to the public. So I always encourage people to find resources that way as well.
You're exactly right. I think a lot of times we think of, just on that last point, social media as being this kind of brain dump of how we're feeling, because a lot of folks use it that way. But it's also a good space to actually get information and learn information once you find a trusted source that you can believe in. Brianne, I want to come to you because speaking of social media, we are inclined to judge every single day out of the week, every single hour on the hour, when we decide should we hit the love button, the like button, the I don't like button. I mean, there's so many opportunities to judge. And so when we think about this just judgmental space that we're in, many of our young people are inclined not to even talk about their issues because of that judgment. How do they get beyond that and really focus on self, regardless of what others are thinking? And it's not just young people that are dealing with that, but we know that they have more accessibility to social media than most adults.
Yeah, I think it's a great lead in to the question, how do you take care of yourself? Social media is a blessing and a curse to so many people, young adults especially. They rely on social media for for a lot of their engagement and their social opportunities and their communication. I mean, I have a nephew that's a young adult, and ironically enough, he got his phone taken away from him, and he blew through all of his text messages in the first couple hours of having a flip phone. His parents did a great job, and blew through all of his text messages they allotted, but only used 1 minute of actual conversation, actual phone time. And
Wow.
So between social media, texting, Snapchatting, that's how kids are communicating. They don't pick up the phone. And so one important thing to recognize with all of that is you're not getting the true picture. And so as the social media poster, as well as the reader, it's important to recognize that is not the whole picture. So when we're comparing our life to the next person's life, you're not getting the full picture. So just because on social media, one family, friend, colleague puts on there that, oh, life's great, we went and did this, this, and this, post-pandemic, everything's awesome. It's important to recognize, how much anxiety was included, how many conversations, multiple conversations may have had occurred before they decided to go out, how much protection, vaccines, whether people have them or don't have them. Everybody's at a different point in their life. So comparing on social media is really, really hard. And it can actually drive the anxiety or the worries of a lot of young adults. And so one thing that I encourage significantly is get off of social media. Try to minimize that time spent scrolling. It's not so much minimize the time communicating, but minimize that time spent scrolling or posting, things like that, because they lead to inaccurate pictures of our lives. They can lead to very good conversations, but they're inaccurate pictures sometimes. And so if you see a friend or somebody post something that seems like they're struggling a little bit, instead of liking or sad face or cry face, or I don't even know all of them, instead of doing that on social media, if you can direct message or flip the conversation to be a little bit more direct and personal, because people it is a trend, and young adults in particular, but everybody that's in social media tends to generalize their problems and be very passive on social media. When people start asking, oh, are you okay? Is there something going on? they want to put enough out onto social media to get questions, but they're not willing to answer the questions on there. So direct messaging those individuals is a form of reaching out and taking care of one another as well.
That's awesome. I mean, and folks, feel free to put your questions in the chat. We're looking at them as they come in, but I think it's critical when you talk about that engagement. Like, it's one thing to like. I was actually just thinking about that this morning, because every morning, Facebook gives us all the updates about all the birthdays, and I'm scrolling down and I'm liking, and I'm like, I should go a little bit deeper. I like this, but I need to tell them what my like means. I love this, but I need to tell them what my love actually means, whether it's in the comments or I'm sending a direct message, because it's not enough to just, those likes are completely and totally subjective, right? But when you use your words to actually communicate to that individual, it causes more of a connection. I think that is an excellent way, because literally was just thinking about it this morning. Alex, one question for you. As we're thinking about how we use social media and how we engage with our youth, what are the good pathways, the best practices as it relates to connecting with our young adults? What have you seen that works? What have you seen that doesn't work? You've told us already, we've got to lead with respect. We've got to lead with not minimizing their emotions and their feelings. What other things are working and are helpful for folks who are listening today?
I think getting back a little bit to social media, I'm glad that Brianna went there, because I actually have seen that a lot in my practice, where young people come in and they basically are always comparing their lives to others. They're like, oh, my life stinks compared to my friend. My friend is in Florida, and the sun, or my friend, is out and about at the bar, and I'm not. I'm apprehensive about doing those things. So I'm glad that the social media point was brought up, because it is true. We really don't know what's going on behind that post, and sometimes we have to.
Nobody really puts everything on Facebook.
That's right.
Nobody.
That's right.
We even though somebody may put up 20 posts in a day, they don't really put everything up, right?
That's right. And so I'm glad that we are having this discussion, because, like I said, I think that for the group of people that we're talking about today, I think that it has been stated that social media is the driving force in their lives, and the main way to be in contact, especially during the pandemic. I've seen a lot of more activity than before. Even those that hated Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, now they're on them, because that's the only way they were able to communicate. And it's funny, because I have also seen a reduction of the use as of the last month or two, because people are starting to venture out. Okay, so again, kind of just inviting people to what already has been said, to try to engage people directly. If you are still apprehensive about going out and about because you haven't been vaccinated, or you have the vaccines, but you still are looking at what's going on out there with the numbers and such, you can still direct message people. You can still contact people like that. One thing that I will invite people to do is again, if they are thinking about taking care of themselves, and maybe they're not thinking about going to counseling, because, let's be honest, there's still some stigma about counseling, right? Especially among young people, and especially among immigrants and refugees, that you see those numbers of apprehension even higher. Think about maybe joining peer groups, that are organized by different entities that are obviously a little bit better than just talking to your best friend, because your best friend is never gonna tell you the truth. They're always gonna tell you you're right, you whatever you're thinking is right, and that's sometimes not the best advice. So try to seek the support of maybe peer groups or entities like that will support you and give you the care that you need at this point. Another form of people taking care of themselves is just, I hear this from a lot of young people here at the universities: exercise. They love exercising, and as we're opening our facilities more and more, they enjoy spending time at the gym, working out, and sometimes they do take a friend or two to work out. So that social engagement, that taking care of themselves, can definitely elevate their health and their well-being, and probably prepare them better for down the road when things get back to the so-called normal.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let's go to the third question, and then we'll round out. Be sure to drop your questions in the chat if you have them.
As the pandemic ends and things start to open back up, what are some mental health or wellness considerations as we manage reentry?
Well, this is probably a loaded question, but we're going to start with you, Alex, on here, and we'll make sure we round out to everybody. Alex,
Okay.
this question was from Sydney Oakley. She's a grad student at the University of Iowa. What are some of these health or wellness considerations that we should take as we manage reentry? I think you started at the last question, but keep going.
Yes. Okay. So one thing I guess I will invite people to do as we start considering reentry is let's offer grace to ourselves, a lot of grace. Okay, because I think that there are times when people are trying to they're considering reentry. They said, I'm not 100% sure about doing this. I'm worried that I'm gonna have a panic attack if I go into a large crowded place and I'm not ready. So again, I will invite people just to offer themselves grace and say, hey, you know yourself better. If you're getting the support from a professional like a counselor or maybe or a medical professional through medication, because let's not run away from the fact that sometimes we do need medication to manage some of these anxieties and mental health diagnoses. But offer yourself grace, consider the situation, and if you are experiencing some kind of anxiety or apprehension about going out, then recognize that, stay safe, maybe take a step back, and then baby steps, maybe rather than going to a concert with your friends or to a crowded bar, maybe consider going to a park and walk around the park where there are others, but not as many people or any of those triggers that might actually cause a more serious situation for you. So offer grace to yourself and to others. So if you are a friend that is inviting others to come out and to re-enter the world, if they show that apprehension or if they share with you their anxiety or their concerns, be respectful again. Don't minimize it. Don't minimize it for yourself. Don't minimize it for others. And when it comes to wellness, we kind of talk about that a little bit, about taking care of themselves, getting good sleep, almost like the classical, recommendations, eating good,
Right.
and basically just seeking the support of a professional. We all need help. That's one thing that I love about my program at Drake, and I'll plug in Drake here. When I was going through the program, they said even counselors need counseling, and that is true. Even
we hear that. Doctors need doctors, lawyers need lawyers, therapists need therapists. We all need each other, right?
That's right. That's right. So offering grace is what I will say is the number one thing for me.
Amy, when we think about all of the things that folks have gone through, and then we talk about re-entering, there's a lot of folks out there that didn't seek the mental health counseling and guidance that they needed, and they're about to get out in front and around people and transitioning into spaces in a more public way. Does that make those challenges go away?
Absolutely not. I mean, I think what Alex said is absolutely 100% correct, that you just have to be patient with yourself. Someone may be more comfortable going into a bar setting or into a large gym, and someone else may just be comfortable going to a park, and it's okay. It's okay to be okay with that. And so the biggest thing is just giving yourself the grace. It's really important just to be patient. My comfort level is probably different than Alex's comfort level, and that's okay. I mean, we can do things and compromise and eventually get to where we want to be. I think the other thing too is that it's really important to set those boundaries and understand what your boundaries are as far as kind of re-entry and coming back in. Things may have opened a little bit quicker than I was comfortable with. So it's understanding my comfort level, my boundaries, and then taking those baby steps, as Alex said. I feel comfortable going to the park, and now I feel comfortable going into a store. Now I feel comfortable going into, to work out. Now I feel comfortable going into a larger gym area. Those baby steps are really important. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you feel.
So there's parents out there that still want to keep their kids safe and want to tell their kids, well, the CDC said this and the state of Iowa said this, and this is what we are learning. And so this is what you should do. Amy, how do parents communicate with their young adults by not sounding like a parent or sounding preachy, but still, trying to give that guidance that I guess they're assuming their kids may or may not know?
Absolutely. I have a young adult child too, so I totally understand.
So what are you doing, Amy? What are you doing with that child?
I think it's truly just understanding, having that conversation with them about what their fears are, or if they don't have fears, what their comfort level is. It's more so us not pushing what the CDC is saying on them, but it's more so understanding where they're at in their thought process, and kind of just encouraging, discussing the safety, discussing the vaccine, discussing, how I feel. And what I feel is different than what my daughter feels. And what my daughter feels is different than how I feel. We have difference of opinions on different things with COVID, and that's okay. And we can be okay with disagreeing on some things, but it's really just having that conversation, and being open to hearing, what they're thinking and what they're feeling.
I think that I was just talking to a friend actually this morning, a dear friend, and we were talking about some of the mental health challenges that they've had over the course of this last year and a half. And now that we're opening back up, they believe, or they believed at one point, that socializing and connecting to others would be the remedy to fix all of those challenges. Is that the remedy, Remy?
I'm not sure that it's the remedy immediately. I think oftentimes we do need, it needs to be a holistic approach to some of these things, like taking care of our mental health needs and our physical health needs, and even our spiritual needs as well, like whatever that looks like for each individual person. I think oftentimes, like when we go through changes like the past year has brought to our attention, it's such a, re-entry on many levels looks like, can be such a challenge, whether it be like a faith community or just socializing, or, going to the doctor's office and talking about these things like, hey, I might need medication for the way that my mental health is currently, or hey, I might need, just to talk about some, like, everybody got fit over, the last year, or I gained weight over the last year. How do I approach myself, like in all arenas, with compassion and grace for the challenge?
And, I think that that's an interesting point, because we're going back to the comparison component, right? And we're so quick to compare ourselves to the other, and to, our brother, our sister, our friends, our family members. Can you give us some guidance on how we just center on our wants, our needs, our desires?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, classical advice, journaling. Like, I always encourage folks to create a roadmap of what you want for yourself. Let's break it down into bite-sized pieces. When we look at all of our goals, all of our wants, all of our needs, oftentimes it can feel overwhelming, and we can just enter right back into that anxiety spiral again. So writing it down, choosing, let's say we've got 10 or 15 things that we want to do, that we want to engage in. Choose the top 3 and let's work on those things. And then go back to that page and reassess, are there new things to add to the list? What's the top 3 now? Continuing to find ways to move forward with those things, but also giving yourself grace to just rest as well.
Yeah.
It's okay to sit at home a couple of nights a week.
Isn't it? It's okay to just sit and be by yourself sometimes with nothing else distracting. Brian, I want to come to you on this last question, which is really about guilt. You know, everybody has their own opinions about what should be happening as it relates to social interaction. But once someone decides, you know, this is what I'm going to do and this is why I'm going to do it, how do they ensure that they're not feeling guilty because others are doing it other ways, or you might be defeating or stomping on social norms? How do you just like minimize that guilt? What do you do? Because the guilt exists. What do you do with it?
Yeah, I think, you know, everybody in a sense has kind of touched on this throughout. And so we can kind of almost summarize our thing today. You know, Alex talked about grace, giving yourself grace. You know, we didn't get to the place we are right now in a week. And although it seemed like all of a sudden guidance shifted that fast, our personalities and our steps and our process, internal or external, doesn't have to shift as fast as the guidance shifted. So giving yourself grace to say, okay, you know, I built this new social norm over the last year. I'm going to break that by taking baby steps, kind of like Remy was talking about, you know, one step at a time, and giving yourself grace if you fail. I tell a lot of people in counseling, you know, it's very similar to substance counseling. You know, you're going to fail, or you're going to have this symptom, or you're going to get overwhelmed at some point. But reevaluating and saying, okay, why did that happen? And what can I do better or different next time to help minimize that? So, and not avoiding, if you got overwhelmed in a situation, don't avoid doing that again, but just reassess and see, like, where do I need to go different? Do I need to take a smaller baby step first to get used to that? So instead of going to a restaurant and sitting indoors, maybe I go to a smaller restaurant and I sit outdoors. Or instead of going to the gym, maybe I start walking at the park. Different steps that can engage yourself in the new social norms, because we still have a lot of lingering COVID norms that probably may be a forever thing. And so it's just kind of engaging one thing at a time and reestablishing a new routine. Looking back to 2020, even 2019, because that was probably the last time we were 100% normal, was in 2019, because COVID happened pretty early in 2020. You know, looking back, we've all grown a year and a half. So, you know, comparing yourself to a person a year and a half ago, we all had to grow up real fast in many different ways. But your young adults in particular, they had so many new challenges put before them that they had to change and adapt to. And there was no question about it. They just had to do it, unfortunately. And so, you know, looking back a year and a half ago, holding yourself to that same standard is not going to be beneficial. So again, grace, recognize that you have changed as a person. The world has changed as well, but you have changed as an individual. And those new social norms might not be well accepted across your entire friend group, but they will be eventually. Everybody will kind of reacclimate to how everybody's comfort level is and stuff. So patience through all of this, and not expecting everything to just return to 2019 normal here in June 2020. Or excuse me, 21. I'm
2021. I mean, but you're absolutely right. You know, we have to at least acknowledge that first. Even though we may admire the person that we were in 2019, a part of us is not like that anymore. And we have to be open and honest about that. 2020 and the beginning of 2021 has impacted us in dramatic ways. And it's accepting how that impact and what that impact has made on our life, I think that can help us see a little bit more clear-eyed versus thinking back in the past. You all have provided so much great information today. We want to thank our experts. If you all have learned something today, pop it in the chat. Let our experts know what you're hearing, what you're learning. I want you to get access to these resources that our experts have offered today. They're listed here. Again, this is not a comprehensive list of all of the experts that are available in our communities, but these are ones that are trusted, that you can depend on, that were provided by our panelists today. And so we're really, really grateful for them in providing that information to us. Great observations, great questions, great resources. You know, I want to make sure that we give our experts an opportunity to give us some parting words of wisdom. And so you all think through that right now. You'll have a minute to check in back with us to give us your parting words. But one thing I do want to mention is that in our upcoming series, we'd like to invite you to Teens at Risk. That's on September 23rd. And at this event, we'll focus on the challenges of the past year for teens who have been deeply affected by the pandemic and other changes that they've been adapting to and are still adapting to. If you want to be at this space in September, again, this will be right after school starts, so there will be a lot of conflict resolution that you all will probably be dealing with. Please go ahead and register today. Be proactive versus reactive from this vantage point, and register at dsmmagazine.com/lifting the veil 2021. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe to our stunning print publications, DSM and IA. When you are a subscriber, you get the print magazines and you also get the digital newsletters, plus special publications like Lifting the Veil and invitations to events like these. And of course, we'd love for you to sign up for these free newsletters, DSM Weekly, Weekend and Wealth, and our IA statewide newsletter. If you need to get your copy of DSM, we know you need to. Again, you can go to the website that's listed, or you can call and get your hard copy at 515-288-4582. Now let's go back to our experts. Can each of you give me 60 seconds? We've talked a lot about a lot, and there are some running themes here, but folks have tuned in today either as a young adult trying to figure out how they get through the next several months or the rest of this year. Folks are tuning in that are adults that want to impart impactful, effective wisdom to their friends and their family members. What are you all thinking as it relates to these closing thoughts? I'm very, very eager. I'm going to start with Amy first.
Yeah, thank you, Deidre. You know, I think the biggest thing that I took away from this is just grace. You know, it's the biggest word here, is just giving yourself grace, giving your friends grace, giving your family grace, and being respectful, as Alex said. But the also thing, you know, give yourself permission to unplug. It's okay. It's okay to just sit there. It's okay to regroup and not feel guilty about that. So just give yourself permission to do that. I mean, you can't be there for others if you're not there for yourself and you don't give yourself time. So Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Brianna, what are your closing thoughts?
Oh, my closing thoughts would be communication is of utmost importance through all of this. It has been, you know, the theme for the last year and a half. Communication accomplishes a lot. It helps us understand the true emotions, the true feelings, the true inner works of everything going on. And so if you are feeling comfortable and confident with how things are going, you know, find a way to communicate that. You should be able to be excited and happy if things are going well for you, but you should also feel comfortable finding a friend or reaching out to a friend to be that support and communicate with them. You know, reach out directly, try to be a person you would like someone to be to you, and keep that communication line open, whether it's with friends, family, colleagues, parents, anybody you can list off. Communicate with them and help people understand the goods and the bads and how to keep moving forward together.
Thank you, Brianna. Remy, what are your closing thoughts?
My closing thoughts are in taking care of yourself. It's not all about action, that we think oftentimes it's so much about rest as well. And to really take that time to really let yourself heal, let yourself, plan, let yourself, like not even plan, like we're talking about rest, right? Creating that space of like, whether it be like a soothing space in your home or, a place that's just yours, or even like on a walking trail or something that you go and you can just be, that allows you to recharge in a way that is deep and meaningful and allows you to re-enter any obligations in your life in a more impactful and effective way.
Thank you so much, Remy. And last but not least, Alex, what are your closing thoughts?
Well, two things. For me, I'm gonna go with what Remy just suggested, unplugging. I think that it's so great to sometimes do that just to recharge your soul. And then once you have done that, then you can definitely be a better servant, friend to others, so recharge your soul, regain your health, your own well-being. And then the other one, grace, I'm gonna go with what Amy said. Yeah, you have to give yourself grace. I'm a huge believer that, this year and a half actually has taught me probably more than ever to not only give grace to myself, but to others. So I will say that those two things, rest and grace, those are probably the best things that you can do for yourself and for others.
There's been a running theme here about grace, and I'll recall for you all, when we first had this conversation in Lifting the Veil, giving grace was a big topic of conversation, especially for giving grace to ourselves, because we had high expectations of ourselves around this time last year, and we wanted to be overachievers around this time last year. There was a lot going on. And now as we interact with so many other people, we're now we have an opportunity to give grace to others in person. I'll give you a story before we wrap up. I was driving down an alley to get into a parking spot yesterday, and an individual who works for a delivery company needed to go somewhere. It was obvious and apparent that they needed to go somewhere. And in their car, I see all of these irate hand motions because they need to be somewhere. And so I pulled up next to the person and I just said, is everything okay? Because he was interacting with me, right? He chose to initiate that conversation. And I said, is everything okay? Well, I need to go deliver this. I need to go deliver that. And I said, is it okay that I get in this parking spot? Yeah, it's fine. Okay, you have a good day. That was it. I could have easily gotten irate and upset with him, knowing that I was in the right in what I was doing. But me being in the right had nothing to do with him in that moment. It had everything to do with where he was in that space. But I gave myself the opportunity to communicate with that individual because he started to communicate with me, and he gave me an opportunity to share some grace. And so as we think through how we can interact with others, the biggest thing is giving each other a break, even when it's hard, because most times it's hard. I want to thank our sponsors again, our supporting sponsor, Delta Dental and Clyde Behavioral Health. We also want to thank our sustaining sponsor, Employee and Family Resources, and our supporting sponsor, IMT. Thank you all experts for popping on today and helping us to invest in our mental health and in the mental health of others. Thank you for being a part of Lifting the Veil. We hope to see you at our next program series. Again, go ahead and register now. It's on September 23rd, Teens at Risk. I promise it'll be something you'll probably need. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and we'll see you back in September.